All right, here in After Effects, what we're going to look at is just basic animations, and we're going to look at the graph editor a little bit. So what I want to do is I'm not going to create a composition with any footage or any pictures or video or audio. I'm just going to create everything here in After Effects. So I'm going to create a new composition. I have my project open, and that's kind of like the space I'm going to use, but I do need to create and start with a composition. So I'm just going to call it, and I should definitely label everything I do in After Effects, my files, my folders, my project panel, everything, and definitely my comps. I'm going to do just custom 1920, 1080, square pixels, 24 frames per second, and let's just keep it at 15 seconds for now. Background color doesn't matter, but I'll keep it white. Okay, there we go. And I have my comp over here, 1920, 1080. It's at 50% magnification right now, totally fine. And right away I see my comp in my project panel, which is great because that's what I'm working on, my basic animation comp, basic animation comp. That's all I want to do. I'm going to create a shape layer. I'm just going to create a shape, and that's going to be a square, rectangle, doesn't really matter. If I hold on my left button on my mouse, I'm going to have access to rectangle, round and rectangle, ellipse, polygon, star, a few extras there. Just going to grab the rectangle too. And I have this star next to my cursor, which is showing me that this is going to be a shape. Later on, this could actually become a mask if I had something else selected. But right now, it's just a shape. I'm going to click and drag. If I hold down Shift, it stays proportional, and that's all. Now we see this is my little anchor point in the middle there. So what I want to show you too is really quickly, there's another way to actually bring in shape layers. Go to Layer, New, and you can bring in a shape layer that way as well. I automatically have the anchor point in the middle of my square. Now by default that might not be the case. So what you could do is actually go up to After Effects and go to your Preferences and go to General. Now on the PC I believe that's Edit Preferences. And what you're going to find here is where it mentions center anchor point in shape layers. Make sure it's clicked on so the anchor point is automatically put right in the middle. Now if it's not, what I can do is I can click on this tool here, and this is the pan behind anchor point tool. And what it allows me to do, it allows me to bring up the anchor point. Where are you, Mr. Anchor Point? Because I'm on the pan behind. There we go. I can actually move my anchor point around. All right, and that's great, but if I don't want to do that, I don't want it up here, I don't want it anywhere, whatever, I want it in the middle, what I could do is I could actually hold down Command and double click on the tool, and all of a sudden it's in the middle perfectly. Go back to my pen tool, move it back, and if I want to align it perfectly to the artboard, or more or less the composition, I could center on my line panel, center on my line panel, and if you don't see your line panel window in a line, and there it is, this is where you're going to find all your panels, and obviously they're going to show up over here. All right, so there we go. I have my shape layer. Now look what's inside my shape layer. Here's my main layer, and it has a little star there saying, yeah, this is the shape layer. It's filled with contents. Well, what are the contents? Okay, rectangle 1, great. I have my rectangle path. I have my stroke, so I can play around with all the different aspects of my stroke right here, and I can play around with all the different aspects of my fill, and I could shut them off if I don't want the fill anymore, if I don't want the stroke anymore, whatever the case is. I'm gonna leave them on for now. It doesn't really matter. The one I want to look at is transform. This is where we're going to do all our animation. So every layer, any layer you bring in, if it's a shape layer, a text layer, if it's a graphic you bring in, any type of image, if it's a video layer, the only layer that doesn't work for any audio layers, you're going to find this transform panel on every layer you bring in except for audio. And what are you going to see? You're going to see anchor point, you can see position, scale, rotation, opacity. These are all things you could do to transform any shape, or like I said, any video, any graphic in After Effects. But what you can also do is animate all these options as well. Anytime you see a stopwatch, this little icon here, anytime you see that stopwatch, that means it's animatable. It could be animated. Now, the way that works, obviously, we're going to use our timeline to do that as well. So this purple bar, or this blue bar, lavender, I guess it is, I can move it. I can bring it up a little bit more so it actually shows up later on after the 2-second mark. And I can obviously undo that and Command Z, and I could actually make sure it ends maybe a little bit earlier, where in my composition, in my animation, it actually disappears. What I'm doing to make the CTI, the current time indicator, or we'll just call it a playhead as well, what I'm doing, I'm just pressing the space bar on my keyboard to make it play. That's a quick little shortcut there. And I'm just going to undo that. Now it's going to be the full length of that 15-second animation that I created here. Okay, so what do I want to do first? I want to create an animation. Well, how do I do that? The very first thing I need to do to be on the safe side is I need to put my playhead, or my CTI, where I want something to happen first. So here I am, I'm on my very beginning of my timeline, and here I'm at the anchor point. Let's mess around with the anchor point first just to show you how it works. So here I have it. I have my dimensions right here, so this is where it's set up. These are the current positions of the anchor point. Okay, so the first number, you have to realize the first number here, this is the x-axis. The x-axis is your horizontal line. And then the y-axis, the second number, is your vertical line. Okay, then later on we're going to show you the z-axis, which is a line that comes actually right towards you. So I'm going to click on the stopwatch, and what happens when I click on the stopwatch? An anchor point shows up right here. Sorry, an anchor point. A keyframe shows up right here. So that keyframe is a little diamond, which suggests to me that right now After Effects is remembering this information right here. Okay, and now what I can do is I can move my CTI, and I'm going to change this information, these attributes, and let's see what happens. If I'm going to move let's pretend I'm going to move my x-axis, so that's where it moves on that horizontal line. I'm going to move it there. So what's happening is my anchor point is not actually moving. The shape around the anchor point is moving relative to the anchor point, okay? But realistically, the anchor point did kind of move within that object. It moved over here. Let's also move the Y, so the up and down. So there it is right there. Now look what happened. When I moved my CTI, as soon as I started moving this information, a new keyframe showed up. Now, if I want, I have this little information over here. I can actually go back to my other keyframe by clicking this little arrow, or I can go towards the next keyframe, and the next, and the next, and the next, if there were many keyframes. That's all I have to do. Now, if I click on my stopwatch again, it's going to delete all the keyframes that are in this line. So if I click on that, everything's gone. It kind of starts over. It just kills them. Okay, but I can always bring that back just like that. Okay, now let's see what happens. This is the animation. So what happens is After Effects remembers this information right here. Then as I went to the next part, it remembered that information, and then it fills in the gaps for me. That's it. Very, very simple. Okay, that's our basic animation. Now, if I want this animation, I'm going to play it. Very simple, very linear, nothing special. If I want this to go a little bit quicker, what I could do, I could just grab this, I could select the keyframe, move it in, and it's going to go much quicker. So over time, this changes from here to here. So that's a much faster animation. And if I wanted to go even slower, I could drag that out. And obviously it goes much slower animation over time there. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to do now the position. So I'm going to bring it back here, click on position. So it's going to remember this information right here. Actually, you know what? Let me do myself a favor here. I'm going to go back here and press Command, double click on that tool to get my anchor point in the middle again. Press align just to get in the middle. All right, so here I am again. I'm going to click on position. Now the stopwatch for position. There it is. Another keyframe shows up. Perfect. I'm going to move it over here, my CTI, and I'm going to grab. So there's a few things I could do here actually. I can scrub. So if I hover over the number and I'm just going to scrub, it moves. Great. If I hold down Shift, it moves the increments even faster, even quicker. Great. Now, the other thing I could have done realistically is instead of just scrubbing and using these, I could have actually just clicked on, oh, I have the anchor point tool selected. I always do that. I need to click the pen tool, the selection tool, and click and drag. And look, the exact same thing happens. Even my position X axis is moving down in my layer panel. I'm moving it over, and there it is too. Now, all these little dots suggest something a little bit later we're going to talk about. This is going to be a very linear, a very simple animation. But we'll see those change a little bit later on. So now if I scrub it back, press spacebar, quick little animation. If I want to make it longer, like I said, I can just drag that out. And as we notice, when I drag this out longer, see all those dots? They get even shorter, even smaller. That means there's even more frames, or we could say kind of more points that After Effects puts in, which makes it shorter. Now watch what happens to all those tiny little dots when I bring this in. They get further apart. So the further apart the dots are, the faster it goes. The more dots and the closer they are together, the slower it goes. Okay? Just remember that. So now I have this fast animation, or I could have that quicker, slower animation. All right, so that's all. Very, very simple. There's our position. Some keyframes there. I'm going to kill those as well. Now let's get to scale. So I'm going to bring the position back. Remember, stopwatch isn't selected, so nothing's being remembered. Nothing's going to be animated here. Just bringing it back. Now I'm going to click on the scale. I'm going to bring my CTI here. Scale. Perfect. Okay, so now once again, keyframe. Great. I'm going to move it over, and I'm going to say I want my scale to be up a little bit more. Great. Doesn't really matter. We're just playing around. Now, if I wanted to, I could actually click off of this link and say, you know what, I don't want it to be proportional. I want this to stretch the x-axis, and that's totally fine. So if I go back, this is what's going to happen, just like that. All right, simple animation. If I want to go to my keyframe, I want my CTI to line up to the right keyframe. I'm going to bring it there. Oh, I want it to go back to this keyframe. I could use that. This really helps us pinpoint those keyframes, because sometimes it's a little tricky trying to line up the CTI exactly on your keyframe. That's all. I'm going to kill that. Let's get to rotation. All right, so I'm going to click on my stopwatch. Keyframe is added. Move it up a little bit further. Great. And now what happens is we have two numbers here. The first number is 360 degrees. So if I click it once, if I scrub it once, or what I could do with any of these numbers, click on it and just type in a number. Once is 360. So it'll make a full 360 degree move. All right. And now this number, the second number, is just the rotation in general, one rotation. So if I want to set it up here, I can. That's the first. And if I go over here, there we go. Okay. Perfect. Now let me do that again, because I just want to make sure we fully understand this. Okay, at this point it's 0, and at this point I'm going to put this back to 0, but I'm going to put this to, let's say, 90. Okay, now let's see what that does. So not a full rotation, just 90 degree rotation. That's it. It's almost this plus this, which it shows that plus that. Okay, that's all. Very simple rotation. All right, I'm going to kill that. Let's bring on the opacity. Obviously we can understand what opacity does. Great. Let's take a quick peek. Right now it's at 100%. I'm going to move it over, and I'm going to bring that, scrub it down to 0%. Very simple animation, nice and easy, nothing special there. Now, a quick way to use some keyboard shortcuts. If I twirl this and I don't have anything shown, but I just want to see certain aspects, I just want to work on, I don't want to see all this, I just want to see some of it. The quick keyboard shortcut for position is P. I see P, perfect. If I want to see just the rotation, I press R. If I want to see just the anchor point, I press A. If I want to see the opacity, I press T, for almost like, I think it stands for transparency, which I'm used to. So there are keyboard shortcuts for both. Now, if I want to see the transparency and the position at the same time, I could hold down Shift P, and it'll bring up both of those for me, position and opacity. Okay, just kind of putting that out there. Another thing we can do here for keyboard shortcuts is I have this keyframe shown, right? I have something shown here with keyframes. Another thing I could do is select my layer, and I could press the U key, and the U key will actually show just the things that are being animated, and my opacity happens to be animated. I can press U again, it gets rid of it. If I press U twice really quickly, it shows everything. Press U again, and everything collapses, which is very nice. Okay, now let's go a little bit further. Let's add a bunch of different animations and see kind of what happens here. So I'm not going to use the anchor point. I know what anchor point does. I really want to focus on position, scale, and rotation. So I'm at this marker here. Position is going to be over here. So now it remembers that. It remembers those points, and I'm going to move it over, and I'm going to have my position scrub all the way over. Great. New animation. There it is. And then it disappears. Great. Hold down spacebar, click spacebar, and it starts and stops. All right, scale. Let's add a scale. Click on the stopwatch. I'm going to move it over. And what I want it to do is to just increase. Oh, you know what? I want the whole thing to increase. Click the link back on. Now it's proportional. There I go. Great. Let's do one more. Let's do a little rotation. Click on that. Bring it over. And I'm just going to have it rotate 90 degrees. Just one time. Line it up. Now, if I know specifically this is going to be 1 second mark, that's where I want it to be, and my CTI is over here, I could obviously click and drag it back, or I could double click on this time, and I can just click on 1. Now, obviously, there's quicker ways to do that. I just want to show you a few different ways to get back there, or I can click it over here as well. I could actually scrub that, and if I scrub to 1, remember there are 24 frames per second, so here if I scrub and it's at 23, the 24th frame is that 1 second, okay? So there I am, and now I could rotate this. I'm just going to click on that, click 90, and there I go. Great, and that's my animation. That's it. Very, very simple. There's so much I could do with this. If I want to bring this here, want to bring this one over here, want to bring that over here. I actually want this to start a little bit later. Anything I want, I can move these around and kind of have some fun with it, okay? But I'm going to bring those all back, just for now. And the other thing I could do too, if I just want to focus on an animation in one area here, number one, I could zoom in and control this even more If I really want to fine tune exactly where these are positioned, I could zoom in, zoom out on my timeline. I could also just focus on an animation here. If I grab this gray bar here, I'm going to grab this blue tag over here, and I'm going to say, you know what, I just want the playhead to go from here to here over and over and over again, just a loop. I just want to focus on this or do something. I can actually do that, which is great. Now I'm done with that. I can bring that back, or I can move it around obviously, but I'm just going to bring that back to the end. Looking good there. Great. Awesome. What I want to focus on now, I'm going to look at some more animation a little bit, but I want to focus now on the graph editor and doing some interesting things with the current animations we already have. So these are very linear, nothing fancy happening here. It's just animating that way. That's totally great. What I want to look at now is what we call easy ease in animation. We're going to ease in the animation, we're going to ease it out. Now we can do those separately. Ease in is just one, ease out is another. When we click easy ease, it actually does both for us at the same time. Then we're going to use this little tool here, is the graph editor. But let me focus on one thing first, is the position. So I'm going to select these keyframes, and I've selected position. And what I want to do now is I'm actually going to do this little shortcut, but let me show you first what it is. If I right click on these keyframes that are selected, and actually it's not here, I'm going to click on keyframe assistant, sorry, and I'm going to click on easy ease, but the keyboard shortcut's also F9. All right, so now what happened, my diamonds, they kind of inverted on themselves. They kind of look more like hourglasses now. Sorry, I did right click here and it was keyframe assistant. It did work, my apologies. Easy ease, there we go, great. Now I could also do a reversal here if I wanted to. Time reverse keyframes, this is pretty cool too, where it actually just reverses these two. So whatever information this one originally had, now it's over here. The information this one originally had is over here, so now you can see the path actually starts from this point and goes that way. But I'm gonna undo that so I have it back over here. There we go, great. Okay, so what I did was I've put easy ease, and what that does, it actually slows it in, speeds it up, and slows it down. You see those little points, remember those little dots I was talking about? When they're closer together, it slows it down. When they're farther apart, it goes fast. Actually, my apologies. I actually think it's the opposite. When they're farther apart, I was correct. When they're farther apart, it speeds up. When they're closer together, it slows down. So right now it's going to go a little slow, and this is just for the position animation. It's going to slow, then it's going to go fast, and then it's going to slow down again. So ease in and ease out. All right, so it's tough to tell, but let's fine tune that even more. So once again, they're closer together. It goes fast. Slower, sorry. The farther apart they are, slows down, and then it speeds up again. Okay, so I'm going to click on my graph editor now. Something's going to happen. This area is going to disappear. The look of this is going to disappear, but it's not actually gone. It is now just in the graph editor form. So what this looks like, it's almost speed, because I'm on the speed editor. It's speed over time. All right, so you have your time is still here, and these are still the keyframes, but this is going to be speed over time. All right, so let's look at a few things the graph editor can afford us. So I just want to have the position shown. So my position is shown here, and I'm going to show, obviously I could still use my zoom to fine tune if I need to fine tune, great. I can use different ways to look at some of the things I'm looking at here. So show animated properties, and now it would show those particular ones. So if I have many things showing right now, it was going to highlight them. So it's showing me that pink is the pink for position, and I have a few other ones here for the red, the green, and all those, but I don't want to see everything. I'm just going to shut that off for now, so I only have the position showing. That's great. I have a few other options here as well. What I can do here as well, now there's a couple things. There's a value graph, which I'm going to look at a little bit later, and there's a speed graph, which is what we're going to focus on right now. So if you don't see this and you see this, that's okay, but we're going to look at the speed graph first. So I have the speed graph open. These are my keyframes that I've already have selected. See, if I click off of the graph editor, I go back here. If I select these, the 0 second and the 1 second mark, that's the exact same keyframes that I had selected in the timeline. So what I can do now, I could actually show the trends. If I selected multiple, right now there's a box around, a bounding box around it. If I want to have that on, I can. If I don't have to. I like to keep it on. Snapping, so if I want to snap, if I want to move this keyframe, I want to move it to the 2 second mark, I can. And it would snap to that area if I need to, okay? So it's going to help me do that, and even moving some of my control arms around as well. Here's another great one, the auto zoom graph height. So if I make this really, really high for whatever reason, what's going to happen is that this viewport, this area is going to actually show me everything. Now let me do the opposite. I'm going to shut that off. If I make this larger, it's not going to show me everything. I'm going to have to kind of zoom in and move around. I don't want to do that. So I just want to click on this so it shows me everything that's happening. I could obviously zoom and see more if I need to, and the other way to do that as well is using our fit selection to view, so you're going to see that whole thing, or obviously there's multiples, but fit all graphs. So if I want to see all the graphs, I can see them all in one spot right in here, no matter whatever my zoom is. Okay, there we go. Now this one is if I want to split the X and Y, which I don't want to do, which I'll explain a little bit later, but right now I'm not touching upon that. Here's another option. I could edit selected keyframes. So I could actually select the keyframes just like I did in the graph or in the normal timeline here. Now I move that. I'm going to bring that back over here. So I could actually select a keyframe like that. I could just click on it like that. They're kind of like vectors. It's almost like a path. These are the anchor points, and there's a little bit of control arm. They don't work the exact same way, but a little bit, and you'll see how this goes. So I actually have some options here, kind of that keyframe assistant again, and a few other options here, which I'm not going to touch upon just yet. There's another option here where I could click on hold, where if I created animation and I actually just wanted it to hold, it won't do anything. And if I play that, oh, it did work. Click on those, press hold. Now that particular animation won't do anything, but I don't want that. The other option here is to convert selected keyframes back to linear, so I could actually make them linear again. And this is what it looks like when there is no easy ease on. And you could actually turn easy ease on right from here, which I'm going to show you. So right now I'm just on my normal animation as if I never clicked easy ease or never applied it. So I'm going to click on those, and what I could do right here is easy ease, or I could just do an ease in, which is what that looks like. I can do an ease out, which is what that looks like, or I can do both, ease in and ease out, which is what we call easy ease. And there's also an option here to, as I mentioned, go back to linear and an auto bezier, which is more or less what's happening here with this. So what I want to show you is like what is actually happening here. So once again, when they're close together, I'm going to mess this up probably one more time. When they're close together, it goes slow. Farther apart, it goes fast. Close together, it goes slow. So right now, once again, this is time over speed. And it even says it here, 4,000 pixels per second. So something's happening with my pixels. So I'm at 4,000 here. So let's see what happens with this time. So at this point, this keyframe, nothing's happening, right? It's at a certain position. That's great. And what's happening, it's slowly getting faster. So as it goes up, it's getting faster, then it goes slow again, okay? So slow, and then it goes faster. So the higher it goes, the higher up it is, it goes faster. And then as it comes down, it goes slow again. Well, what we could do, we could fine tune this even more by grabbing these little control arms here. I'm going to click and drag this in a little bit and see what happens. I'm starting to create kind of this curve here. And what I'm doing is I'm going to make it so that the peak goes really fast. It's slow here and it climbs fast, and then it comes out fast too. So we're seeing what's happening with the little dots here as I move. As I move this, look at what's happening. That's a big stretch of space. That means it's going to go really fast. So slow, fast, slow. So let's really fine tune that and see what we can get here. Okay. Now obviously, like I said, the higher it is, the faster it goes. So here I'm going to play this now. Let's watch what happens. That was much faster. So it went really slow, super fast, and then slow again. So I could really fine tune that if I wanted to. Say, you know what? It went really fast. I don't want it to go that fast. All right, pretty good. But I can obviously make it go as fast as I want. Now, if I bring this up, I'm actually bringing it so it's going to start fast and end slow. There we go. Okay. Now, I can't dip it below the 0 point, which is fine. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to keep it like that. That's fine. The next thing I want to look at is the scale. Once again, the scale's looking like this. It's looking linear, right? Because I never converted these to easy ease. So let me do that in the graph editor. I'm just going to click on these, and I'm going to click on easy ease. There I go. It gives me that hump again, where it's going to go slowly build up to fast and bring down. But I could also, once again, fine tune that. Okay, and now this is the scale. So if I play it normally right now, all right, that looks pretty good. So if I bring this now, it should slowly get bigger, and when it gets to that point, it's going to go really fast. So there we saw that scale get a little bit bigger right away. Good. Now it's based on percentage of the scale per second. So once again, it's scale now over time. Now let's look at just the rotation. So same thing, I'm gonna go back here, I'm gonna click on these, I'm gonna press, I have to press function in F9, that's how mine works right now. I'm gonna go back to the graph editor, same idea. All right, I select my keyframes. I can move them around. So you know what? I actually want this keyframe to be over time. I want it to go to the 1 second, 1 second, 12 millisecond mark. That's fine. So just a little bit more if I move those around. Great. And I'm still going to kind of bring this in and bring that in. Great. Play that. And let's see what happens. That was with the rotation. A very similar situation with that rotation there. It kind of starts off slow, goes fast, and then slows down again. All right, great. And now the same, and that was that rotation. So this is degrees of rotation over time. Now if I click on opacity, same idea. It's very linear. Nothing's happening, right? So what I'll do is I'll click on those keyframes, easy ease, and now it's doing the opposite. That's kind of interesting. It's dipping below. It's minus percentages of opacity. That's because I went from zero opacity to, or sorry, full opacity to zero opacity. If I did the opposite, this hump would be the opposite. So let's actually do that. I'm going to make this 0%, and I'm going to make this keyframe, or I should just click on here. I'm going to make this keyframe 100%. So now, if I easy ease that, oh, let me go back here just to make sure that I did not mess that up. So there we go, it's 100%. Let's start that off with 0. Go here to 100%. There we go. I'm going to easy ease that, which is that. There we go. So now our hump is in the positive. So it's saying that, okay, at 150% per second, so our percentage of opacity is it's going to slowly go high, and then it's just going to stay there more or less because our opacity is going to be at 100%. So that travels as well. So that's how the speed graph works. Now the value graph is, and actually let me show you something really quick. If I select all these, I can actually see all my graphs all at the same time. So if I just want to see my position or my scale, I click on scale. If I just want to see my position, or if I select all of them, hold down shift, I can see everything. These are all my scales, or all my keyframes and what's going on all at the same time, all my animations, and I could kind of play around with them here. This is a little trickier to see them all at once, but I guess it is okay to click on them, and if I wanted to, I can try my best to figure out what's going on, but it's a little bit easier just to click on one at a time. Great. So now once again, I'm going to click on one, but this time I'm going to go to the value graph, and the value graph is just the values. So I'm not talking about speed. I'm now actually can fine tune some of these things using the speed, the value graph. So I can still click keyframes, move things around, play around a little bit, move things up. See, when I move this one, now look at that. The red axis is how I'm moving that particular path, where it actually starts. Okay, so that seems to be moving on the X axis of the horizontal one. This green one, however, what does that do? Let's see. Oh, that's moving the Y axis there up and down. Okay, that's kind of interesting. That's great, but I don't really want to do that. I kind of would rather fine tune that up here. But once again, just to show you some of the different things that you can do, it's snapping back to its position, which is great. And once again, if you don't like what you did, Command Z, undo it, and it goes back to its original form. And this is all we have to do. We're just playing around. I'm going to click on scale. Let's see what scale does. Okay, now scale actually gives us control arms like we're used to with our vectors. Let's see what that can do. All right, I can move these around. So it's going to, once I actually move these around as well, it actually does affect my speed graph as well. So let's take a look. So this is currently what's going on with my scale. I'm going to go back to my value graph, and I'm just going to play around, and let's play this and see what it does. What does scale do? All right, so I'm going to bring my scale up just a little bit more. I'm going to now move this down here. Let's see what this does. Okay, let's go back to my speed graph. Okay, that definitely changed. It used to be like this, and now it's like this. That's a little weird, but let's see. It's also about just playing around, seeing what it does. Let's see what the scale does. Not much. I think it stayed the same for a while, and then all the scale happened here. So it stays the same, stays at its normal amount, and quickly shoots and changes to its new scale. Okay, that's one way to do it. That's pretty cool. Now let's do the opposite here. Let's go this way, and let's go this way. Let's take a look at our speed graph and see what happens. Okay, something definitely different happened here. That means it's going to shoot up super fast and then super slow. Let's see what that happens. So it's more or less the opposite of what we just did with the other graph. Okay, so let's see this. All right, so it just changed super fast and kind of kept it the whole time. So that's one way we could play around with this value graph with scale. Rotation, once again, degrees over time, so not much happening here, but we can obviously play around those control arms. Again, I just showed you what we did with that. Let's bring it over time a little bit more, and we could play around with if we wanted to kind of flow in quicker or slower. Oh, having a little bit of a RAM preview issue there. And that's it. We're just playing around. That was actually kind of cool what it did there. It went really slow, and then it quickly flips everything right there. Pretty interesting stuff. This is all I just wanted to show you about the graph editor. A lot of different things you could do. I'm going to go back to the time, and obviously a few things have moved around, which is totally cool. Not a big deal. I'm just going to move those back, and let's just see what we got here. Yeah, it's hard to tell what's going on anyways, but the least I could do is take this position, and let's move the position. So no, let's move that position altogether. I'm going to take this and bring it back, so at least we can see what's happening. All right, kind of an interesting look there with that animation. The next thing I want to show you really quickly is if I apply an effect to anything, there's going to be stopwatches on certain effects as well. So let me go to the effects panel, and let me click on a color correction, something very simple, hue saturation, nothing special here. So I'm going to find that. Where are you? There you are. And what I'm going to do to apply effect really quickly, if I have this already selected, I could just go here and double click, or I can click and drag it onto that shape layer or whatever layer it is, and here it shows up right here. Now it looks like my project disappeared. It didn't. It's right here. So my project panel and my effects control. So now I can control the effects. But look at this little stopwatch there. And if I wanted to do some colorizing, there's some more stopwatches here. But I'm just going to focus on this stopwatch. So at this point in time, let's just say I'm going to click on that stopwatch, and what's happening, it's remembering all these attributes, all that information. And look, as soon as I clicked on effect, all that information's down here as well. All right, my hue saturation effect, and here it is. And once again, that stopwatch is selected, this stopwatch is selected. I deselect it, that one's deselected. So I can make my changes here or here, it doesn't really matter. You might actually like the visual aid of this UI instead of this, but whatever works for you. So as soon as I clicked on the stopwatch, look, a keyframe is made. If I move it, and keep in mind, I don't have to just do something and make another keyframe. I could just click on this little button here, the keyframe, and add a new keyframe and make some changes. So there's also another way to make that keyframe as well, not just make changes to it. And then all of a sudden something will happen. So, but let's do it anyways. Let's actually just move my saturation. Let's say I'm going to bring my saturation really low. It's just going to become black and white. That's it. That's my animation. You can make animations inside effects that apply here inside this timeline. So there I go. Happens here, it goes black and white. That's it. Very simple. But when I collapse that, what it looks like, it's two dots. It's like, why does it look like two dots? Well, the idea is telling you that yes, there's an animation here, but it's kind of inside. You have to twirl down to find it, and it's inside of an effect. So I'm going to bring that down. Oh, there it is. And even if I had this twirled, it would still show me only two circles. So I'm going to bring that back. There I am. And there's my effect. Once again, I could play around with that, move them around together, move them around separately, make that happen earlier, make it happen later, whatever I want to do. All right, just press spacebar, and there we go. So those are simple, basic animations, ways to play around with animating at a very, very basic level. But with all those different ways, we actually have access to a lot of things we could do to creating motion graphics and having a lot of fun with it. The last thing I want to show you is making it 3D. So now it's not a full 3D, proper 3D with extrusion and depth, but what it is, it's using a 3D space to create a bit of, let's just say 2.5D, and is that what they kind of call it. So let's take a look. So what I'm going to do, as of right now, this is not a 3D shape by any means. I am going to just knock all these off. I'm going to start fresh, and I'm going to get rid of that effect. How do I get rid of that effect? Click on it, delete it, click on it, delete it, whatever I want. Okay, my shape layer is back to normal. Click on my position, and I'm just going to move it over just to get it back in the middle. Or, oh, I've got to make sure my opacity is all the way up so I can see it. But you know what? Probably what I'll do is just go to my align tool and center. There we go. Okay, cool. So I'm going to make this 3D. How do we do that? Well, number one, I need to actually make this layer a 3D layer. By doing that, I need to click on this little 3D object here and click on it and say, yes, I want this object to be 3D. Well, what just happened? Let's do that again. Normally I have my X and Y, everything there. If I click on 3D, this shape is now 3D, and look what happened. A couple things happened. A Z axis was added here, here, and here, here. A whole XYZ rotation were added here. A lot just happened. Not only that, now this little widget shows up showing me, hey, this is your Y-axis, this is your X-axis, and now your Z-axis, that's the one pointing right at you. And it happened here as well. Okay, that's interesting. Now let's take another look. This is the current camera we have. This showed up as well. The current active camera is the camera that we see normally. But if I want to see custom view, I want to see what else is going on with this. Now I have this in 3D. Wow, okay, that's pretty cool. I can move around. If I hover over, I can say, okay, I want to move the Y-axis. I'm moving the Y, and we see it change here in the orientation as well. I'm moving the Y-axis. See how it's moving kind of in a 3D plane, kind of in a 3D way, which is really cool. I can move the Z-axis. Once again, that's when it goes away from the viewer or closer to the viewer. All right, and once again, these parameters are changing as well, just as I'm clicking and dragging. If I hover on the X, I can move the X in the way that goes too. I'm going to reset all this because I just wanted to get back to normal. What I can do also now, what got highlighted were my cameras in my tool panel. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to orbit around it. So I can just click on my orbit tool and I can orbit around and kind of see where I'm at there. Okay, interesting. I can click on my pan tool and I can pan around. All right, in perspective there. And my dolly tool, I could go in, closer and out. All right, because this is kind of like working with a camera. Like, what does the camera see? Great. Now, whatever you do here doesn't really matter because you're just working around. But when I get back to my active camera, that's actually what is seen. So we got to be careful about that too. Okay, so what you see here is, let me get back to that. What you see is exactly what's actually happening here, not from the custom view or any of these others. The active camera is actually what's going to be rendered and what's going to be seen on your video. So let's play around with 3D a little bit. Let's go with the X-axis. So what's that do? Remember, a little further away from us, a little closer to us. That's what the X-axis is, the one that's coming right at us. All right. Well, but let's look at this orientation. This is interesting. Okay, so how do we orient this X-axis? Okay, so it's orienting, rotating more or less on the X-axis. Pretty cool. That's a fun way to work with that. How about the Y-axis? What's that do? Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Good. See how it's actually going in, not perspective necessarily, but it is working in a 3D kind of way. And look at that, just by scrubbing, that's the kind of animation I can make. And then my Z-axis, that's what's happening there. All right, now let's see if this works. What I want to do, I'm going to reset all this. I want to double click on this, holding down Command, and see if it gets back. Yes, it does. The anchor point does go back no matter what, even if I have my 3D on, which is good. Let's look at these rotations. So these are actually, I could rotate, not just one rotation. I could do an X, Y, or Z rotation. Nothing happening there, obviously, because that's the 360. So let's move that. Okay, that's a rotation there. Now these are very similar to the orientation in general, but I have individual ones I guess I could do here, which is great. So let me just do something simple here. I'm going to start off with the orientation here on my CTI. I'm going to click on my stopwatch. I'm going to rotate it so I can't see it anymore. Now, if I need to zoom in a little bit, I can. I'm just playing around right now. Let's just say the full 90 degrees, so I'll type that in. I'm going to move it, and I'm going to say, oh, I want it to appear back to 0. Okay, cool. And that's it. There's my animation. So that's how we work kind of in a 3D way that it works out quite well for us. That's all I want to really show you on how 3D works as well and how we can animate in 3D space. And if I actually click on my camera, custom view 1, I can actually now see exactly what happened there in a 3D type of space. Now, the more objects you bring on, if you click them on 3D, you'll see them in the 3D space. If you bring a shape or another layer on, any kind of layer, and you don't make it 3D, you're not going to see it in this 3D space. But you'll see everything in the active camera view. And this is more or less what we were looking at when we were talking about animating, playing around. If I click off of the 3D, it's all gone. All that information I had, everything is just gone. The one last thing I wanted to show you, I'm going to click my position. I'm going to move my position. And now what I can do is just to say I move it over here. Great. I could actually now separate these. I could separate my dimensions. So I could separate the X and the Y. So I could do something strictly just with my X, just with my Y, and separate dimensions. And now I have my X and just my Y. So if I was just working with the X, I didn't want to be bothered with the Y or vice versa. I can now just work with those separately, and sometimes that might come in handy when you just want to focus, which is cool. Another thing I could do with this path is actually play around with the actual path, just like it was a vector in Illustrator. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to open up my transform. I'm going to click on my position, click on my position here. I'm going to move it a little bit. I'm going to click on another keyframe, and I'm just going to move this to the right. Great. And what's happening here, I'm actually creating some control arms here that are happening. So I could actually make this a curve. So let's play around with that and see what happens. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to move this. And now what I can do is actually play with the path. So look at that. That is actually a control arm that I can move. All right. So I'm going to bring that one up here. I have another one I can bring down here. So now I have ultimate control over this path. And the good thing about that too, let me play that around. There we go. Kind of weird, but it is what it is. Just to show you what you can do with it, I could actually also go to my pen tool now and click on my add vertex or anchor point, and I can click on a new anchor point here. Okay, there it is, and I've added another anchor point with control arms. Click on my selection tool and move those around. All right, so now I could actually really do something interesting with this path just by playing around with the vector, the vectors of it, the path, making anchors, making control arms. And here I go. You know, very kind of interesting idea. That's all I wanted to show you with how you could still play around with the path pertaining to the position of it.